And we're live, Warden Danielson.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see our CAOs here. Before we go any further, I just want to say how much we appreciate the work that you're all doing on our behalf. I know that this project has created a huge amount of work for you and meetings, and we all appreciate it. And I want you to know that. So if we could have a roll call, please, Mr. Rutter.
Warden Danielson.
I'm here.
Councillor Moffat.
Present.
Councillor Roberts.
Here.
Councillor Kennedy.
Present.
Councillor Burton.
Here.
Councillor Ryle.
Present.
Councillor DeVolen.
Here.
And Councillor Schell.
Present.
Thank you.
And could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda for this afternoon? Councillor DeVolen, Councillor Moffat.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that the May 26, 2021 Service Delivery Review Implementation Steering Committee agenda be approved.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Just so you know that it does speak to, or the agenda speaks to adoption of minutes, but actually our first meeting was a different structure than this one, and those minutes were adopted at our county council meeting. So there'll be minutes at the next session that we have. And before we get into new business and the report, which I'll turn over to Mike, I just want to encourage all the CAOs, if you've got something to say, don't be shy. Just because you're at a council meeting, you're part of this group, and we like to hear your input. So just put up your hand and we'll listen. So I'll turn the meeting over to Mike.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'll just outline, I won't go through the report, I guess, in detail or read it word for word by any stretch. What I've tried to do, I guess, is to lay it out in a way that Strategy Corp's highlight, or their high-level observations are at the beginning of each section. I've included some context in the second part following that also includes the timeline that Strategy Corp suggested. And then I've summarized the comments of the CAOs as far as the suggested path forward, and included some timelines in there as well. So I've done that for each and every section. Starting with roads, the CAOs are suggesting, and sorry, I should say, I won't go through it in detail unless committee would like that. So I'll just jump for each series of recommendations or for each section. I will deal with, I'll jump to the suggested next steps. The CAOs believe that all the initiatives in the roads that have been identified by Strategy Corp in the roads section should be investigated. They believe that many of them require support of a centralized procurement function, which we'll talk about later. That we will obviously, in order for these collaborative purchases to work effectively, we will need to work together to standardize budget processes and some of our procurement policies, certainly approvals. What we're suggesting we'd like to do is work with the Public Works Working Group, which already meets as the Haliburton County Road Supervisors Association, to develop a list of projects where all or a group of county municipalities could effectively collaborate in the next couple of years. We'd like to report back to committee and the local councils with those recommended projects. And just as a note, depending on the items that will be reviewed, sometimes it will be directors if there are more strategic issues being discussed, but sometimes it may actually require us to call on operations managers or people who are more familiar with the day-to-day operations. And so the membership of the working group could actually grow depending on the topic. So that's what we're recommending as next steps, and I guess I would see if there are any questions or comments about that.
Questions, thoughts, comments about roads and the approach there? Pat?
Is
Sorry.
there a primary goal of identifying some of the low-hanging fruit to be recommended in time for 2022 budgeting? Any thought to that?
That would be our goal. Absolutely. Yeah.
Any other questions or thoughts about the road section and the recommendations being made? Okay, sounds like we're good. We'll move on to fire.
Fire services was, I guess, a little more an interesting conversation with the CAOs. I think they have circled back with their fire chiefs, and they're not sure that there was necessarily a full understanding on the part of the consultant on some of the suggestions that were made. So what we are suggesting is that we meet with the fire chiefs to better understand the opportunities that were both described in the report and ones that weren't necessarily captured by Strategy Corp. I don't think those are earth-shattering recommendations, but I think there were some suggestions that they felt didn't find their way into the final report. And then and there have been some changes around, there was some discussion about training facilities, and we all know that the province has made some decisions of closing regional training facilities. And so that may in fact change either the recommendation or the proposed timeline around some of the recommendations. So we'd like to circle back with the fire chiefs and talk about that, and then present the findings to committee before the end of 2021.
Thoughts or comments about fire services? Nothing? Councillor Shell.
Just a comment that I have noticed and know through our Minden Hills Fire Chief, Nelson Johnson, that the 4 municipalities have been collaborating very well on getting training across the board done on weekends. And I know our fire hall down here, there's always vehicles there from other municipalities on weekends lately doing training, and it's really nice to see.
Yeah, I think overall from when I started on council, like I really can see a great improvement in the level of cooperation between the different departments, but I sure hope to be able to see some more. So any concerns about this approach? I guess one question I'd have, Mike, is as we establish working groups or have discussions, with different groups, how is that going to be reported back to us? In this format, like we would continue to have regular meetings and.
Yeah, so I guess my thought was that this group would meet at least quarterly, and that the meetings, there would actually be minutes or meeting notes kept from each of those working group sessions, and they would come to this meeting each quarter.
Okay. If there's Councillor Moffat.
It came out during, as stated in the document, during the interview, that Minden Hills was considering a training facility. I'm just wondering if those, as part of those conversations, if there should be consideration of a training facility, if one is going to arise, that it be a little more centralized than Minden. So if there's going to be an opportunity to collaborate with using and obviously paying for user pay or whatever the cooperative aspect is going to be, Minden's a long way away for Highlands East. So is it a matter of Minden's going to thinking of it and everyone else should get on board, or does it make more sense to say a training facility is a good idea for the county, and where would it best be located in the best interest of all?
Thoughts or comments about that? Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. In light of what Councillor Shell just said and things going on at the Minden Fire Hall, does it need to be a coordinated training program, or does it need to be a facility? So for instance, when they were doing, Dysart was doing winter training, ice training, that was here on Head Lake. So that was an outdoor thing that could be somewhere like, does it have to be a brick and mortar building? And if not, could or more, is it we're looking at training programming that could 1 month be held at the Minden Fire Hall, another opportunity held at an outside location, because that's what the training is referring to. And I don't know that we need a brick and mortar space.
Councillor Moffat?
Yeah, it's a good question, and that's the chief certainly would be able to answer that. There's no issue with doing the online aspect of fire college training anywhere. It's the practical aspect of that training that needs to be talked through. And there has been far much more coordination and collaboration. So the training, the ice and water training that Dysart did that you just mentioned, Councillor Roberts, I believe Algonquin Highlands was there. And there just is more of it, which is great. The recruit program is county-wide. So I think that's the question that needs to be asked. Does it need to be bricks and mortar or just a consolidated program? But I think there is an opportunity for bricks and mortar, but exactly what it would look like and where it would be, I think is what needs to be determined.
Councillor DeVolen, glad you put your hand up. I was about to ask what you thought.
Yeah, two things. The first of all, the discussion about what I'll call the bricks and mortar element came about in Minden when we were planning and building our new facility, having looked around our region for training elements or assets in Port Sydney. One of those little, 2-story cement block, like it's actual a physical structure that they can practice a number of techniques. We don't have such a facility. That's kind of from Minden Hills where the beginning of the dialogue came about, and that when we laid out the property, that there's physically space that's available there. The other thing that's happened, obviously, since that time is the fire college is no more. So it's been beneficial that there's decentralized and online training and more collaborative stuff, which we're seeing already. But the question, I would say, goes back to the fire chiefs, that type of physical asset like that's in Port Sydney, do we have a need of one within the county? And then the subsequent conversation about where it is or isn't located could go from that. So kind of from the Minden perspective, that's where the discussion came about, what was considered as an evolution of what we had as an asset in Minden, and that we had already thought about where we would put it on our property, but the locale to me is far less relevant than whether we need that type of asset. And if they all agree we do, how much it costs, and then where do we put it?
So we're open to discussions about that. I guess it'd be good to hear what the chiefs have got to say and how they feel about that, and that will help us guide how we go forward. So any other thoughts or questions about fire services? Now's the time for discussion. Okay, we'll move on to waste management.
Before I do, if I could just give a little more fulsome answer to your previous question, Warden. So let's use the fire service as an example. I think if we are bringing back a report of any significance, whether it be answering the question about the training facility, whether it be, I think I would suggest that there be representation from the fire chiefs that come to this meeting as well. It wouldn't necessarily just come through a set of minutes. They would be present and able to answer questions directly. So I apologize. I don't think it will be much more than minutes. I think when we get to actually presenting reports, they will be much more involved in that process.
Okay, that sounds great.
So the waste management, I think there were a number of different items discussed by Strategy Corp. They did have a couple different options identified in service delivery. I'm happy to say that some of this work, as I understand it, has begun already. I know that County Council discussed the combined app just last month. And so some of the work has begun already. So what we're suggesting is that a summary of the work completed to date be provided to the steering committee. And then it does talk about some intermunicipal agreements between two of the parties. And what we're suggesting is that work happen between the affected municipalities and doesn't necessarily have to come to this meeting or to this group. And then because the Strategy Corp report identified a couple different service alternatives. I guess our comment is that should committee desire an increased level of partnership in the area of waste management, we would request direction in that regard. So I think there's collaboration, and then there's a higher level of partnership that they said was another option, which we didn't think received any traction in our first meeting, but we, I guess if we didn't hear that correctly, we would look to committee for direction.
Councillor DeVolen and then Councillor Kennedy.
I say this to Mike, but also the other CAOs. As a byproduct of our asset management and life cycles and the lead time it takes to do anything with waste disposal assets, is there likely something going to come back to this group out of those 5 asset reports that will play substantially into waste management?
I'd look to the other 4 CAOs. I don't know the answer.
There wouldn't be anything in Highlands East that would impact it.
I wouldn't think from Algonquin Highlands either.
And certainly from Minden Hills, as Deputy Mayor Shell and Councillor or Mayor DeVolen knows, that we are looking at, there will be future reports coming back at our level, just talking about efficiencies that can be made. So from Minden Hills perspective, yes, there will be some reports coming forward specific to our landfill sites.
Yes, and we're continually working through different strategies on our landfill sites too, as they go through different changes over the next couple of years.
Okay, Councillor Moffat.
When it comes, thank you. When it comes to intermunicipal delivery options, just wondering what that entails, and wondering if it's a matter of are there opportunities? This could be like a horrible suggestion, but opportunities for almost like emergency service delivery, its closest car, so that there are people in Minden Hills in the Carnarvon area who be a lot closer for them to go to the North Shore Road landfill site than it would to go down to Scotch Line. And are those the kinds of things that we might be looking at longer term? Or is that what does intermunicipal delivery options mean in terms of that logistical on the ground work?
Any of the CAOs have a thought on that? I don't. It's not a service we're directly involved in. So
Shannon and then Tricia.
For Highlands East, we currently already have some agreements in place. One in particular that we've been working on is with Minden Hills to allow residents that are close to Highlands East to utilize our landfill site. And we do have a form of agreement, I guess, with Dysart for some of the residents that are close to that area. So one of the things that we looked at is that the certificate of approval, the amendment for the certificate of approval takes quite a while to do. So I'm not sure if there are landfill sites where that could transpire and possibly applications go in to assist, but that is something that they could look at.
Councillor Kennedy.
I know I'm one of the minority here, but I would really like to see us take waste management up to the county and have a hard, long look at it. Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus of 2016 wrote a white paper promoting even inter-county development work to help cut costs and increase efficiencies. Dysart is maybe unique that one of our biggest landfills now gone to transfer station. The costs of moving that up every year, and it seems like if we had a little more volume with our neighbors, we might be able to get a better contracted price. Our second one, West Guildford, is going to go to transfer at the end of this year, I believe. So it's something that's happening in the future, and I know some townships are in good shape, but it's a problem that's going to hit all of us sooner or later. And I'd rather take a look at bigger piece of, through this bigger lens than just what we're looking at right now. Thank you.
Councillor DeVolen, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, I mean, everything I read says that it takes $1 million in 10 years to shove the paper. And it seems that some of the early changes that we're considering in Minden, it's everything about scale. Approval for the land that's big enough to do it, and the scale to do it collaboratively, whether it's on a procurement basis where things are going outbound or whether there's something done that's on the ground. I share the same views as you, Councillor Kennedy. I think it's inevitable, so why wait and be dealt and painted into that corner? Let's be proactive and out in front of it.
Angie, you had your hand up?
I did, yes, thank you. Algonquin Highlands already has an agreement in place with Minden Hills, for example, for Pine Springs landfill, and users of that from Minden Hills can use that landfill. So those are in place, but I really do think that ideas around this is key to having our staff involved in that, the ones that are hands-on with waste management.
This would seem to be I see this as being one of the more complicated issues that we're looking at. It's a big one. And there's a number of different levels that we can be looking at. And, I mean, sharing landfills, more cooperative agreements between, neighboring municipalities. I would hope that would lead towards a greater partnership. I'm not sure, what the appetite is for that. One of the things that I see also is that there's a little bit of, maybe more than a little bit of difference in how each of the landfills operate and the fees that they charge, and it creates more confusion. And I think one of the things that our goal is, across the board with this whole service delivery review, is to reduce confusion. People, that are, I mean, we've got lakes that are in 2 municipalities, and people start to wonder, okay, well, I'm supposed to do this here and that there. And so that, there's a lot of work I see that can be done in that regard too, and equalizing our operational, guidelines, if you will. Councillor Schell?
I just want to add, and just to support what Pat had said, for years and years on council, I've said the same thing, that I felt that this should be moved to the county.
Well, I guess we'll have to see what the appetite for that is. And, that'll be part of this process, to see what comes forward from reports from our public works people and those that are involved. Any other thoughts on how we could proceed? Andrea? Sorry, Councillor.
I'm not sure if Councillor Schell was finished, and then I'll go.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just didn't want him to think he was alone in his thinking when he said he felt like maybe he was the only one. So.
Well, and of course, that's sort of in the background for any one of these topics that we're talking about. Waste management might be one of the more difficult and challenging ones, though. Councillor Roberts, did you have something further to say, or just?
Yeah, I did. I just didn't want to. I could tell that Councillor Schell wasn't 100% finished there. So, I don't actually agree fully right now, because well, we are in a 2-tier system, and waste management is the local municipality's responsibility. We own the land, and our certificates of approval are with those with each municipality. However, and Councillor Kennedy will know, we have a councillor on our Dysart council who, every time we talk about waste management, says, "What about incineration?" So eventually, while we've had to go to transfer stations at 2 of our landfills already, and a 3rd one quite quickly, we'll all be in the same boat. And we have talked about this a little bit at the county table before, in terms of advocating with the province that, is incineration the way to go? And if so, then, trucking our garbage to Chatham, Ontario, it just doesn't seem to make sense in the days where we're supposed to be aware of climate change and how much that haulage is and everything else. So I think those are the kind of things that we can be looking at, in terms of, how do you because basically everything that a car or is going in is going back out again. So there's a lot of transportation happening. And yeah, I just think dealing with it on a bigger scale, not necessarily giving it to the county, but looking at supporting incineration and getting support from the province for helping small municipalities deal with their waste.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, so from the Strategy Corp report, option 1 is for municipalities to approve recommendations from the working group to promote standardization. So that is, I guess, what you described, Warden, in terms of, standardizing what gets recycled or what gets, what is waste in one, and standardizing those kinds of approaches. Option 2, it doesn't necessarily talk about it coming to the county level. It just says municipalities approve a county-wide review of assets. And when you review that even in more, it says each community is reviewing its transfer and landfill stations. However, these reviews are generally done in silos or in isolation with each other. If these reviews were done collectively, there may be efficiencies that could be achieved by completing these reviews collaboratively. And then it outlines some of the issues below. So I think what it's saying is to have those conversations about, how are things changing? Are some changing from transfer stations or from landfills to transfer stations and those other things? Review those assets, but almost take away the boundaries. But I don't think it's necessarily talking about moving the jurisdiction for that necessarily. But to have the conversation to see if there's a way without boundaries, things could be done more efficiently. Does that make sense? So review them, but review them as a whole, as opposed to individual municipalities reviewing their assets.
So would that require like a consultant's report, or is that work that can be done in-house? It sounds like I see a little head shaking, and I mean, it's maybe that's one of the things that the working group needs to talk about, is bringing forward a proposal to do a review. I mean, we saw in the service delivery review a number of places where there was likely reports going to be required, and that's something that we're going to have to think about and budget for.
And it may not be all landfills or all transfer stations. It may be some of them that get reviewed together because you've decided that it may make sense to review these 4 or these 5 together and see if there's a way to do it more efficiently. So, but absolutely, I think a further report and to get some facts would be a great starting point.
Councillor Moffat and then Councillor Burton.
Along a similar line, my question, based on what the CAO has just said, is, are the proposed efficiencies to be found, as you've mentioned, Warden, in some sort of report or in the operations themselves? 2 very different things. So that's what I was looking for. Is Mike sort of answered that. So it sounds like stay tuned on that, but there's a difference between, hiring a consultant to do a review of all landfills in the county versus how to find the efficiencies in the operations and consolidation thereof.
Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Burton.
There somewhere, Mike, in our archives, there was a study done a few years ago about this, and I would love to have it dug out and have the council. That they decided to accept the report, and they decided just to shelve it. But I don't know if you've ever seen it or not, but it is there, and I would like to certainly see it. It may be
waste management.
On waste management, yeah.
I also know that there was a fairly substantial delegation and presentation made to Dysart Council years ago about incineration. And it seemed to me, it just seems to me that the bottom line was that it was too expensive for you to proceed with on your own. And that might be a long-term opportunity for partnering. Councillor Schell?
I actually think in my time, there was an investigation into a county-wide incineration project, and based on the amount of tonnage required to have the incinerator work at the capacity that it should, that so much garbage would have to be hauled into the county via large trucks, et cetera, that it didn't seem like a feasible solution at the time. Now, things change. There's maybe different types of incinerators at this point, but I with what David just said, or sorry, Councillor Burton just said, I think that there might be something out there if we can get our hands on it.
Yeah, I think that that really rings a bell, Councillor Schell, about there being the volume, and people started to kind of backtrack a little bit at the very thought of bringing more garbage into Haliburton County. Councillor Kennedy and then Councillor Burton.
Yeah, just a new technology that's actually not all that new. It's new in North America. And I've been involved with this group that's looking at purchasing pine stone, and they're big on this. It's a cold fusion kind of a reduction of garbage. It's a slow heat. It draws the moisture out of it. Does almost comes out like a pellet at the end that can be dispersed on as topsoil or whatever. I'm just trying to find it's a company in Italy, and is expanding into North America, and people that are proponents to buying pine stone want to incorporate that into their plans if it ever comes to fruition. But it is a real company in Italy. And so I'll circulate that if you want, because it's kind of an interesting take on rather the typical incinerator with the big stack. This is a different process, and it is scalable from a small neighborhood up to as high as a municipality. So it's just new technology. So I'll circulate that out and around. It's just an FYI kind of a thing.
Well, and I think they've got the emissions issues resolved with a lot of the incinerators that they've got too. Councillor Burton.
I was just going to say that I've been part of the debate with incinerators for 15 or 16 years now, and we haven't moved forward one bit, which is pretty disappointing.
Yeah. So, okay, I was just going to say any more questions, and there's Councillor Moffat's hand up.
Just to follow up from Councillor Kennedy, there are opportunities out there. I think Councillor Schell said the same thing, and I think we need to look outside sort of the way we've always done it. There are technologies available. I know that permissions and licensing and certifications are different in Europe, but there are places that are just so far ahead of us, it's embarrassing. And I think there's opportunity to really be innovative around this.
Any more thoughts, comments, or questions on waste management? Councillor Rael?
Yeah, I think the last 2 or 3 people that have been speaking here, I think that's the direction we got to go in. Right now, we're kind of sort of discussing yesterday. Today is happening, and what we need to look at is tomorrow. And if we can get a way to dispose of garbage, there's a lot of things going to go away, but that's one thing that's not. We're going to generate more and more of it as time passes, even though there's an intent to want to reduce it. And eventually, you can only shove so much stuff under the rug, and eventually there's a big bump, and you can't do anything with it. But if there's new technology, environmentally safe, complementary, if nothing else, I think that would be the road to go. And having said listen to Councillor DeVolen, I mean, tomorrow is a little late to start looking in theory. I mean, I don't mean literally tomorrow, but in the next 2 or 3 years, we need to start looking in the next, say, 12 to 18 months as to what we want to do with that. I think waiting too much longer than that would not be a good idea.
So we'll leave this with a working group to take a look at some of the things that we've talked about today. There might be some conversations between partnering municipalities to see if there's further opportunities for now. And obviously this one's going to come back. Hopefully we can dig out some of these old reports that have been referred to. There's got to be a great big shelf somewhere in the world with a lot of reports sitting on it, really dusty. Okay, so next on the list is building, septic, and bylaw services.
I should make a note, though, that I think Tamara Wilby is the only one who knows where that great big shelf is. She seems to know where all that stuff is. So it's great to have that resource around.
Yeah, I can help you get your hands on those files.
Good on.
So the building, septic and bylaw services is another one where Strategy Corp laid out two very different levels of I guess, approval, or very different levels of collaboration. One was shared services agreements, where, for instance, Dysart and Highlands East could work together to have, Dysart staff cover a certain area of Highlands East and vice versa. Backup agreements to cover vacations and leaves, that kind of thing. The other option is a voluntary service integration. So there's a very different level, two very different options presented. The CAOs would like to meet with the building officials to better understand the alternatives presented in the report. We understand that they actually presented one of those service alternatives, and that this is one area where I think we hear a level of urgency because of the how busy our community has become all of a sudden in building and bylaw, and so we're suggesting that more detailed report be presented to committee in 2021, probably in the fourth quarter.
I know one of the ongoing concerns that I keep hearing is that all of us continue to develop bylaws that need enforcement requirements, and we really don't have the capability to adequately enforce them. And we also put people in the awkward position of having to tell on their neighbors, and people are very reluctant to do that. So that results in a lack of success. There's also been, I think that there's been a number of discussions about trying to streamline forms and processes so far, but I suspect that there's probably quite a bit more work to be done in that regard. I'm looking for thoughts or comments here. Councillor Moffat?
Yeah, I would agree. I think we need to streamline the services and, with full appreciation of the challenges. And then, as we've talked about, we've bandied about the idea a number of times of being able to enforce our own bylaws. It's understandable, but at the same time, a little bit embarrassing. And so if we had streamlined or consistent bylaws and approaches across the entire county, sort of, like a single tier. But then we need bylaw people. So we've talked before about 4 municipalities hiring floating bylaw people. And it would be easier if there were bylaw people who floated, and maybe they had zones or regions they covered, to assist in enforcement in this ever-changing community. The piece that would be paramount to that is the consistency across the board in terms of what the documents say and what's permitted.
And what's permitted is a big one too, because there's different things permitted in different communities. So it really would be good to hear further discussions from our bylaw people and building officials. I'm not quite sure how septics fit into that. I gather it's so in some, it's the building people and bylaw people that are involved in that too. Do you see that as being something that can be tied in as one major discussion, or do you think that there needs to be a breakout discussion about septics and how we approach that? Councillor DeVolen.
In most of our jurisdictions, they're primarily managed or attended to by the same personnel in the same department. So from my mind, building, septic, and bylaw are all part and parcel. Not that they're not segmented a little bit here and there in some of the jurisdictions, but they're principally covered by that. And yeah, I mean, I might as well say it now. Item 4 and item 5 on this, I'm on the record, and I'll be on it again, and I won't say anymore. But both of these things should be done on a consolidated, unified, county-wide level. Whether it's a shared services framework or whatever, that separate entities still exist, but functionally with uniform standards and programs and everything across the county, in my mind, for this and planning are a must.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. So other comments or questions about, I just kind of going back, I guess, to septics. I know that, I believe we're all doing something slightly different with respect to septic inspections. And, you know, I mean, that's one area that we can start working on. I see that as becoming more, taking a higher level of priority all the time, you know, as we look at the health of our lakes and, you know, to land on a process that we can all feel is good and will work for our individual municipalities. Carol, did I see your hand up? Oh, and Andrea. Okay, Andrea.
Okay, thanks.
It was.
It's okay. So just to recap, so the CAOs, it says, would like to meet with building officials to better understand the alternatives presented in the report, blah, blah. Because I think in a lot of the cases, it's hard for us councillors, either on county council or on our local, to fully really understand what staff do on a day-to-day basis. And I know that the building officials do talk. I know planners do talk. They have set meetings. UCAOs are all now having set meetings. So I think maybe it just does better understanding how they are already coordinating and just, is that making any sense? They do get together and they do talk, and I think we do have agreements with, for instance, at Coagama Lake, where there's a little piece of dysart. We share some stuff, but I'm not 100% sure as the elected official, not there doing the day-to-day job. Maybe actually, Tamara, you can answer that better.
Yeah, one of the recommendations within the review is to look at those areas where that kind of streamlining makes sense. And that's an example area for sure, where Algonquin Highlands could potentially inspect for us.
Councillor Burton, you had your hand up. And you're on mute. Oh, now you're gone.
Sorry about that. I was going to comment on what you'd said about the septic reinspection programs, like each of us being different. And I think that would be something that I'd certainly entertain looking at.
Okay, well, we'll look to hearing back on some thoughts and ideas that result from additional meetings between the CAOs and the building and bylaw people, and see what you come back with. Any other thoughts or questions or comments about building, septic, and bylaw? Angie Bird. You're on mute.
Sorry, just for clarification, are we to look at septic inspection as part of a initial septic application, or are we looking at our septic reinspection programs? Because I think as far as the discussion around septic inspections, those are pretty much the same across the board. We took that over from the health unit. So, but our reinspection programs are slightly different.
Well, I guess just looking for some direction. I was probably referring to the re-inspection programs and how they're a fair bit different.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that, Tamara?
Yeah, because some of us are right now to do that, perhaps as we can look at the end dates of those contracts and look to maybe we'll know more after we get through these first few years as to what's working best, and maybe there's an opportunity for a county-wide contract as they're expiring. We could plan for that perhaps, or at least to look into the opportunity. And then you'd be sure it was the same, but.
Councillor Kennedy, then Councillor Royale.
Yeah, I like Tamara's concept of letting these current contracts expire. We just started a new one, Minden Hills has, and then work towards standardization. And I hate to add something else to it, but I'm wondering if this septic reinspection program becomes a piece of the bigger lake health initiative that we should be looking at through a bigger lens. I don't want to bring that up today, but just something to keep in the back of our minds. The fluctuating water levels, the wakeboard boats, the shoreline, this whole thing, it all affects each other. If we drop the water and then you raise it up, it erodes the shoreline, which creates the problems. And I just wonder if this is just a piece, but it's a huge elephant to take on. But I'd like us to be aware that this is a critical piece moving forward. Anyway, just my thoughts, and we've got enough on our plate to start with, that's for sure.
There's a lot of work ahead of us. Councillor Rael?
Yeah, the inspection program is near and dear to my heart for sure. And I know that we have different ways of inspecting, and I'm sure that can get resolved over time. It's when you get to the actual violations, regardless of which one you chose to get to where you are, you have low risk opportunities and you have extremely high risk opportunities. Is there any thought to coming up with some standard penalties, restoration, bring it back to the way it's supposed to work policies that could go across the county, indicating a common program that says, okay, regardless of how you got to be where you are a serious risk person, regardless of what municipality you're in. And then come up with a standard program that says, here's how we, regardless of where you are in Haliburton County, are going to rectify that and bring you back into line. Because I know some of the challenges that we have in Highlands East is we have some that have dragged out for a while. And yes, we're working very hard to bring them under control, but it's been a challenge. And having a countywide policy would really be, in my mind, a great thing that would be enforceable.
I think that's all that would form part of trying to have a standardized program. I mean, so a re-inspection program, so that, you've got the same process that you're using for inspections and the same outcome, which is what you were referring to. So other thoughts and ideas about building septics bylaw enforcement? Okay, on to planning.
I feel uniquely qualified to speak to this one as the acting director of planning for the county of Haliburton.
A role that you'd love, I'm sure.
I think I'll maybe take a little more time. What we're suggesting is that we would like to meet with the planning staff to develop a comprehensive work plan, but I'd like to take a little more time to talk about what would be included in that work plan. And I think Strategy Corp identified a number of different initiatives that we could implement in order to harmonize the approach to planning in the county. And one is standardizing the public notice format. I think I do receive a lot of them as the county clerk, and there are different formats in every municipality, and sometimes it is hard to figure out who's trying to do what. There's the issue of harmonizing fees. And I'm not sure we'll ever get to 100% harmonized, but I think in some cases, there are big discrepancies for what one municipality charges for one type of planning application versus another. And from a developer standpoint or a builder standpoint, that would be frustrating, I think, to say the least. And then there's the standardizing the pre-consultation process. And this is maybe a personal opinion as the director. With the level of activity that we have now, I think it's really critical that we look at our planning processes to make sure we can process these applications in a timely way, or developers will get frustrated and go somewhere else. There's so much interest in developing in Haliburton County right now. I think we want to make sure that there is a process that works for both sides, that there's a comprehensive review, but everybody knows what to expect. So when we talk about developing a work plan, that's sort of what the items that we would be looking at or suggesting we look at initially. Strategy Corp also talked about another couple things. They talked about hiring a junior planner and sharing that workload. And they talked about hiring an administrative support person at the county. And I think what the CAOs, or what I heard from the CAOs, was that in some cases that they've retained their own services to cover off some of that. I think Highlands East has recently hired a planner, and they didn't feel those were high priorities given all the other things that we were facing. So I think we're suggesting that we look at those processes first and then see where we are at the end of that. I guess the other thing is they talk about a consolidated official plan, and I think, again, in the interest of walking before we run, I think if we can look at those processes and harmonize them or standardize them as much as possible, that may happen more organically in the future, but it's not something that we're suggesting we take on immediately.
I have to say about the processes and things like fees and the frustration, I believe, for the builders and developers having to deal across the county with 4 different processes and fees, when it comes to both building and planning, as well as bylaw. It makes it really difficult for them to have, so many different ways of doing business within one county. So thoughts about those recommendations, Councillor DeVolen?
Just given the fact, to talk along the lines that Mike did, given Minden Hills and the county have the same firm looking after our planning affairs, I'm not sure, like Oscar this morning from KPMG that offered up some value added for free, but they're in a unique position to look at from the upper and the lower tier, that they're responsible for kind of both sets of files, day-to-day operations, streamlining and harmonizing. They might be in a special position that if we are considering this on a larger scale across the county, they might have some unique thoughts from outside of our bubble.
Other thoughts, comments, questions? I've got to say that this is one area where I'm just one person in the group, but planning is an area that I see a really good opportunity for us to consolidate services. And there's so much overlap, different processes at different levels, that it just seems like an area that we should be able to consolidate. But as Mike said, let's walk before we run. So any other thoughts there about planning? I'd hate to be the guy that would have to consolidate into one official plan for the whole county. I know that the counties is the overriding document, but to bring them all together, it'd be interesting. Okay, economic development. This one should be a little easier than some.
Yeah, done. Moving on. I would just give an update to committee. We have drafted the job description is drafted. I'm a little uncertain about it. It almost reads like a to-do list as opposed to a job description, and I want to just in my own mind think about that a little more. We have consulted other communities and looked at their job descriptions just to compare, but when we did the draft, I have to be honest, I looked at it and I said, like, that's a work plan, that's not a job description. So I'm circling back on that one. But it is our hope that we can have a job posting out before the end of May. And as noted in previous reports, really critical first piece of work is to develop a countywide strategy, and that would be the first task for the newly appointed director and council. It's really important that council participate actively in that process.
Well, I lied to the public yesterday, I guess, in my report on Canoe. I had said that the job description had been prepared, and I was pushed on the question of has it been posted, and I said it had been. But
the job description has been drafted. It's just a question of finalizing it, and that's not a lot of work, I promise. We're there.
Well, we're on the way for economic development, and that's an exciting piece for us all, and a success. So any more comments or thoughts about economic development? We'll have lots of opportunity to talk to the successful candidate and tell them what our goals and aspirations are. So on to collaborative procurement then.
Yeah, so as I noted earlier, a lot of the hard savings that are identified in the service delivery review are the result of collaborative purchasing and savings that have been found in other jurisdictions. And when they've applied those findings to the Haliburton context, they came up with a very large number. What the CAOs are suggesting is that this be a priority in 2021. If directed by committee, we would proceed to prepare a staff report similar to the one we developed for the economic development position, drafting a shared services agreement, because this is a little bit different in that it could be utilized by all or any of the local municipalities. Develop a job description, and we hope that all of that work could take place in the third quarter and recruitment happening in the fourth quarter. We really would like to see the groups working on a number of projects that would make sense to be done collaboratively, and then have this person in place who could then work on standardizing our policies, work on standardizing processes, and then be ready to go early in 2022, hopefully when budgets are approved.
Yeah, it would seem to me that the sooner we can get, if we're in agreement to move forward with it, the sooner we can get that position in place, the better. It'd be nice to have them in place in sufficient time to sort of fit into the budgeting process across the board. If there's, something specific that we all need to partner on. Thoughts? Councillor Kennedy?
Yeah, we're just in the process at Dysart of hiring a procurement and grants person. So Tamara, do you see this coordinating then with the county procurement position as well? Dovetailing?
Yes, our position would be the liaison to this position for any opportunities where there's joint procurement projects going on.
Thank you.
Other thoughts or comments? I found it, well, I'll leave that thought. Any other thoughts or comments on procurement? Are we in agreement to proceed with this process this year? Yes, sir. I'm only seeing 2 nodding heads. That's 3 nodding heads. Okay. Sounds like you've got some concurrence there. And if you could bring a report back to us at a subsequent meeting, about how you see it proceeding, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Like you don't have enough reports to work on now.
Okay, the integrated digital strategy. Before I start, I really, I said this to Mike March directly today, and but it really does bear repeating. I think the willingness that exists clearly in throughout the municipalities in Haliburton County to collaborate, I think is in large part due to the success that we've seen in IT over the years. And so it really is his head is swelling over here. But Mike has led the way in this over the years. And so much of what we're working on is because we've seen it work in IT. So we feel comfortable to move to those next steps. So great job, Mike. What we're suggesting as next steps would be identifying the primary contact person for IT issues in each local municipality. They would meet with the director at least quarterly, and to begin the process of identifying the long-term information technology needs in the county. We're suggesting that this work begin in the third quarter of 2021 so that we can be ready for the 2022 budget process. We're really well positioned to incorporate some of this work into the 2022 budget process because a lot of it's been happening informally already. So it really is taking something that's working and just strengthening it. Strategy Corp recommended a pilot project. They actually recommended records management as the pilot project, and for anyone who's been involved in records management, it is a monumental undertaking. We're suggesting a little bit more manageable first project, and the CAOs and have been working with Mike already, and the clerks, I believe, to begin a process to ensure that all of our documents on our websites are fully accessible. All of our websites are, but not all the documents that are embedded into them are. And so we're suggesting that that would be a good pilot project to work on together, and with IT leading that, of course. And it wouldn't just be hiring someone to come and make those documents accessible. There would be some of that, but it would also be teaching our staff to make them fully accessible as well, so that we would be self-sufficient in the long term. So that's what we're suggesting with respect to IT.
Thoughts or comments, questions? Councillor Dvolan.
I couldn't imagine being in this pandemic with Zoom meetings and all this in the absence of an integrated, consolidated approach to IT in the county. And not only do I hope and wish that it'll continue to evolve, some of these other elements that we're talking about today, I hope this can serve as an example about how we may do some of these things in other departments or areas.
Other thoughts? Is the group in agreement with what's being recommended by our CAOs? Yes, I'm seeing nodding heads.
I think Councillor Roberts has a question.
I'm sorry, Andrea, your face is just.
I know, I'm in the shadow. It's too dark where I'm sitting. I'll stick the spotlight in my face. Anyway, yes, actually, that's what I wanted to speak to. Is I think it's great that even though Strategy Corps said, "What about this?" This is where we know our business better. You know the business. CAOs know the business best. I think making sure that the documents on our websites are accessible is a huge priority, and I really am in support of and how you came about to make that the better pilot project, if you will. So good job.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, legal service. Oh, sorry, Councillor Royale.
I was just going to say, my personal opinion is that integration of IT across all of our stuff is good. And although this is a baby step, I think it's like, wow, long overdue. I think it's something that really, really we can use. And I'm looking forward to being able to tell people exactly how it can all work. So very, very much in support.
Thank you for that. Okay, well, shall we move on to legal services then?
So members of County Council will recall that we did receive a letter, I guess a couple months ago about this initiative. And I think the primary, I guess, thing that I took from that letter was the concern that there would still be a lot of outsourcing of specialized legal work. And so where the CAOs are suggesting is that we do more analysis to determine how much work would be done by the in-house counsel if we had one, and how much would be outsourced to specialized firms like human resources law, other specialties. And so we're suggesting that we do that analysis. I would say that we're hoping for the fourth quarter of 2021 or the fourth quarter of 2021 or the first quarter of 2022. And Algonquin Highlands and the county are both going through some financial system changes. And I guess, so a lot of this is really just, finding that information from our financial systems. And so I want to make sure that we are in a position to glean that information efficiently. And if it takes a little bit longer to do that, then I'm suggesting that that might be worth it. But certainly we need to do more analysis to see how much work would actually be suitable for an in-house counsel versus specialized services.
It seems to me at this point in time, we're probably all using quite a bit of a particular municipal law firm's time. And if I'm not mistaken, we also, some of us use the same human resources firm that are specializing. So I can see that there's already some overlap and some opportunity here, but I'd look for thoughts or comments from council or from anyone here. Councillor Kennedy.
That letter that we received really opened my eyes, because he laid it on the line pretty easy that it's just going to be a referral service. As he stated in his letter, the request comes in from a municipality, he just says, oh, I just refer this on to the ABC law firm because they specialize in that. And just how much, and then the cost did not appear to be reasonable, because this lawyer will need support staff, support overhead. That is only, I think, I haven't got the letter in front of me, but I think it was, if we went this route, that maybe we would look at contracting a very large firm with a number of specialized lawyers within that corporation, so that you would do that link. But I think looking at what we've spent in the last few years, I don't see a real cost benefit savings on this. So, even the strategy course, they're saying a possible $52,000 a year savings, but if we have to hire support staff, that kind of negates that. So we've got a lot of other higher priority things to look at, I think, is my opinion.
Well, we're seeking some further information, and if a little bit of time is required to go through records and come up with the data that we need to discuss this further, I guess this is going to take a little bit of time. So are you satisfied with what's being recommended at this point in time? Yes? Okay, don't see anybody saying no. All right. Human resources coordination.
So the CAOs are suggesting that the potential for reviewing or for pooling benefits would be a really good starting point to discuss collaboration. There are factors, though, that affect that. We each have, well, I'm not sure we each have different, but there are different broker services for benefit insurers that serve the county, and obviously we have existing benefit contracts. And so what we're suggesting is that it would be important to review those, find out when those expiry dates are, see if when we could look towards a pooled program if in fact council direct us to do that. And so really it's gathering information, bringing that back to committee to see if there's an appetite for moving forward on that. They also talk about the potential for a shared service, and I think that the CAOs are I guess we feel we share a concern that with only one person in the county HR function who is very, very busy in her own right, then we're just concerned about adding workload onto that position when it's only one position. And I think, so we're suggesting that not necessarily be a priority area. And if there's a willingness to start adding to that resource, then we could look at that in the future. But I think generally everyone is pleased with what they have in place now. The third item, I guess, was HRIS, and again, the county and Algonquin Highlands are undergoing an HRIS, or undergoing a financial software upgrade or update, and I know Dysart has and Highlands East use a module that's attached to that same software package, and they're very pleased with it. I think until we're fully implemented, we don't really feel like we're in a position to evaluate whether it would meet our needs or not. And so we're suggesting that we monitor that, wait till our Algonquin Highlands and the county are fully implemented with our financial software system, and then move forward. I guess the one Minden Hills uses a very different financial software system, and so maybe investigating a more standalone, and as the others may as well. But that's kind of where we stand with HRIS.
Okay, thoughts, questions? You're reasonably satisfied with that direction for now? Okay. Let's talk about communication.
So I think this is one where there was a little bit of, I guess the committee struggled, and I think staff did as well, with what was actually being proposed. So I actually spent some time talking to my counterparts in Renfrew, and I think the recommendation actually came from the experience of Renfrew County, and they have it's a joint media relations and grant coordinator position, and I've tried to describe that. Well, I've taken it from Strategy Corp's report, but I think that like every municipality, we're a bit like snowflakes. We all approach things differently, and I think Algonquin Highlands has recently, or is in the process of recruiting a communications person with your own set of expectations. I think Dysart has looked at, I think Tamara's already talked about it, the procurement and grant writer or grants position. So I think components of this are being done, but I think we just want to, the CAOs are suggesting that we just monitor how those things go and see if there's any willingness to move or any need to move forward in the future. But I think for now, we're just suggesting we monitor those two new positions that are being created, and there may be some nuggets there that we could all learn from in the future. Comments?
It's interesting. We recently had a discussion in Algonquin Highlands about combining media and grant writing. I mean, for me, it seems cleaner to combine procurement and grant writing. But it just seemed like those were two such totally different roles to me that I didn't see them together. And yet, you're saying that that's what they're doing in Renfrew counties, which is interesting, because to me, it takes somebody with a very specific set of skills to do that. Like normally a communicator or a media person wouldn't necessarily be a grant writer, but it shows how much knowledge I've got. Did I see a hand up? Was that you, Councillor DeBowen? I'm sure I'm sorry, Councillor Moffat.
Brett and I look a lot alike, so it's easy to confuse.
No, it's where you are. It's where you are. You see a hand up in the screen, and
this lovely red hair I have up here.
Yeah, I've been very quiet. Someone out there is probably thinking, well, she's not saying much for somebody who usually talks an awful lot. I confess I'm struggling a bit. As Mike said, each municipality has its own personality and serves differing needs. And along with many of the things we're discussing, I don't see the point of a joint communications person. It's a big job, but it's a united message. And I don't see the point of that person until or unless we're amalgamated into a single tier. So there, I said it out loud. It's the elephant.
Wow.
And I look forward to the governance discussion that will follow this process.
The one thing that I take from the communications piece is that I think that we all, as members of councils and the CAOs, are doing a much better job of meeting and communicating. And I think we all need to put greater effort into communicating with each other, keeping each other informed about things that we're doing and how we might partner or work together on some things. I just really think we need to be better at that than we have been in the past. And I'm talking more about members of council than I am about the CAOs, because you're all doing a really stellar job. Councillor Moffat.
I think we did do a better job prior to the pandemic, and I think the pandemic has, like across the globe, has thrown everyone for a loop. I have spoken a little bit, a little bit gnashing of teeth that I've felt disappointed in some of our communications as councillors that I do feel was better prior to the pandemic. I think it might partially be with the fact that we don't meet in person, and there's tremendous value in the sharing that we all enjoyed prior to meetings when we were getting our cinnamon buns and our coffee. But I think there's been so many changes in that regard. I agree with you. I think we need, as elected officials, to try to get back to where I think we were prior to the last 14 months.
Yeah, I agree. Councillor Roberts.
Thanks. So I guess there's two things. Like there's corporate communication and sending out a message, which that's coming from whether it be a local municipality or the county, and then there's communication from the mayors, deputy mayors, councillors, etc. Two kind of totally different things. I don't even have a mayor Facebook page or anything like that, but I'm always happy to repost anything that Dysart or the county has posted on Facebook. And I have to say, I think Dysart staff, I don't know about necessarily at the county, but we have actually cranked it up a notch. And as each staff member is getting more comfortable using social media, so it's sort of, as opposed to have a one person do the communication piece, our environmental manager is doing his communication piece. And our recreation person, Alyssa, she's been doing a lot of stuff on communication, and then that gets shared. And at the county, we've had Amanda Vertanen do a lot of the communication pieces. So I actually think over COVID, the communication has ramped up and been clear. Maybe that's just my own interpretation, but I think that we're sort of doing it as department to department, and maybe Tamara or Councillor Kennedy, you want to speak to that? If we have something in our waste management that we want to share, our landfill hours change May 1st. Well, then that's out there, and I think we're doing a great job.
Councillor Moffat.
Yeah, I would agree, Councillor Roberts. I think in terms of messaging of municipal function to the public, Dysart has definitely upped its game and is admirable. Minden prior to that was leading the pack, doing a good job. Highlands East has been steady across the board. Algonquin Highlands doesn't have a corporate social media presence, and so that's part of the reason for our communications person is to assess, align, and reconfigure all of that so that we're doing a better job there. I just want to clarify my comments about communication not being as good. I meant between us and among us as elected officials. I think that we're so busy juggling so many balls now and working at home that that we can do a better job amongst ourselves and get back on track to where, again, maybe just my opinion, where I think we used to be as a group of people in the county. It's not the end of the world. It's just a note.
Councillor DeVolen.
And to build upon Councillor Moffat's comments there, that the little communications, the micro conversations that are helpful in painting a bigger picture of what's going on, I would make the observation in Minden Hills that all of those public committees that we have that help us in all our departments, first of all, there gets to be confusion what is and isn't going on with the particular things, like, might I say, a scout room. But there's a lot of other things that we miss. Our engagement with our members of the public that sit on committees that direct us in the same direction and keep us out of pitfalls, when we're back to normal, in the sense that we're back in a room meeting again, I think both council and our committees will all be in a better place to dissect that from that we have Zoom meetings like this, that, how many of them we've had this year in the absence of COVID and pushing forward with this. How many times would we have communications that we'd all have the people that are on the screen here in the same room that we could talk intelligently about that stuff. And so on that side, it's been a mixed blessing to me, and I'll be happy to gain back what we've lost. Plus, we can still keep these elements added to the mix.
Okay, so we'll move on to the final item on the list, which is coordination.
I actually think you all covered it. I think Strategy Corp really talked about two things. They talked about improving information sharing, and that's where they recommended the standing item on the committee of the whole agenda. And that would either, I guess, where that kicked it up a notch was county council could have those conversations, and then I would report back to the CAOs about the conversation that had happened at county council or a committee of the whole. And so I think there will be a little bit of learning as we go with that. We saw that last week where Councillor Roberts suggested that we discuss the short-term rental, or a couple weeks ago. We discussed short-term rental, and we just, it takes us a bit to figure out exactly how we'll do that, but I think we find our way. And then there's the improving coordination, and those are sort of the items that are referred to the steering committee for evaluation. So the report itself and implementing the service delivery review final report, and any new items that are referred would be able to come here. So there's sort of an informal information sharing, and then the more formal review of items. And so I think you talked about that. I think there's no question that COVID has impacted the way that information is shared, but I think inside this report are two options to ensure that can happen formally, and then that will be much more effective when the informal can happen again.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. And also to Mike's point, we added to our procedural bylaw just sort of last fall or whenever it was, to put this, and I think I've spoken to this before, mayor and deputy mayor update. So yesterday we had Dysart Council, and I was able to, because it's a sort of open-ended agenda item, it gives me a little flexibility to talk about things that are happening at the county table as well. Or just in and around the community. So, but it is a sharing back and forth mechanism as well, that we've put on our Dysart agenda, so that we're able to communicate that both directions.
Well, Councillor Kennedy, then Rael, then Moffat.
And it'll come as no surprise. I usually get my foot in my mouth or engage my mouth before my brain. And yesterday it happened again during my update when we were talking about short-term rentals, and I was saying that I was hoping that it would move quickly, and quickly taken to task on how quickly meant. And is it going to be done by the third quarter? So I would love some standardized communication to come out of our county committee of the whole or county councils, just that'll keep me within the guidelines. But I think it's a great opportunity and to give our councillors some updates, but it could be expanded upon and improved. There's no doubt. So lots of times, Mayor Roberts and myself cut them off short because of busy agendas, but it's been proven to be a useful tool for us.
Yeah. So we need a process to control Councillor Kennedy.
Can I write that one?
No. Sorry, Pat. Councillor Rael.
Yeah, the COVID's not been a good thing in many cases, but it certainly has when it's between communication and cooperation. I mean, when this becomes a bad memory, hopefully it'll be in my lifetime. The whole things that we've come up with some of the Zoom meetings, some of the digital type communication that we've had, those are going to become entrenched in what we do. Because for one thing, when you look at our staff, and we have 4 or 5 here, they would have had to get in the car, drive somewhere, spend that time, get organized before, make sure their staff is in good shape, then they have to drive back again. That was not necessary for this meeting. And business goes on. They're available. And so these kind of meetings will go on. On the other hand, there are times when you need to meet face to face to do the kind of networking that's necessary to move things forward more aggressively. So I'm optimistic as to what we're going to be looking at in a post-COVID environment. We're going to keep the better things of what we've got. We're going to evolve some of them into things that amalgamate nicely with the face-to-face. And I think we're going to come out of it as a much better unified group, whether it's one unified group or 5 groups working together. I just don't see the downside at this point if we do what we're doing right now and continue to do it.
Councillor Moffat. You had your hand?
Me, I did. Me already. I wanted to circle back with Councillor Roberts' point about what you've added to your agenda. How do you? First of all, I think I've said before, I'm the big old meanie that I think members of lower tier councils should be paying attention to county council business of their own accord. But secondly, how do you avoid, when you do that update, when you or Councillor Kenny do that update, how do you avoid getting into a discussion that someone in the public might have been interested in, but it wasn't published?
If I may.
Absolutely.
Well, first of all, there's no discussion. It's just me talking. So we're just with Pat. So I'll give you an example of wait a second. Where's my little notes from what I said yesterday? Just to kick it off. I talked about the short-term rental, even though it was on our agenda. So that was on our agenda, and how because of this process, I was able to bring it up at the county and I talked about the vaccine clinic. I talked about the rail trail grant at the county. So you can read the agenda on the county, say about the rail trail grant, and still not get really the meat and potatoes of it. So I wanted Dysart councillors to pay attention to the grant and see what was going on, and also it gives us a chance. Those meetings are public. The press are reporting on them, because there's quite a bit, like at the trail head or here at the beginning, is in Dysart. I talked about another grant that Dysart received that we're working with the county at Industrial Park and County Road 21. And then I mentioned that our washrooms are now officially open. So it's nothing secretive or agenda-like, it's just fairly broad, but it was a good opportunity to talk about the rail trail grant because why not?
Councillor DeVolen, and then Councillor Kennedy.
So I do the mayor's report at Minden Hills, and similar has been mentioned. And if there's questions from members of council with respect to that, they ask them. When we go back to normal times, what has been our what we do in Minden Hills is at the end of the open session, I ask the public and I ask the press if they have any questions regarding the day's proceeding. Now that might scare the daylights out of some, but we haven't really had any horror stories. It's been respectful, and it helps them clarify some of the things that have gone on that they don't officially have the opportunity to ask a question.
Actually, I think Highlands East used to do that. I don't know if they still do. Yes, I see nodding heads. It's an interesting process, and does sometimes help to clarify things quite a bit. I'd hesitate to say that sometimes stories in the papers are not quite accurate. Okay, I guess what I'm left with asking is that from this point on, we'll look to the working groups to continue to meet and bring information back to us. Is it council's wish that you, because we had initially talked about talking about this, just having it on our committee of the whole agenda every month, so that there's anything to be brought up, that it's brought up in a timely way, so we can continue in that vein, or we can have special meetings like this. And I would look to all of you to say which you would prefer. Councillor DeVolen.
I'm willing to do a hybrid. There are things that are small in nature that aren't going to spin off into an hour and a half conversation. because there's other meetings on council day in the afternoon with the library board and other things, whatever. If it's something that it's knowing that's going to require substantial occasion, then in those odd circumstances, then just have a special meeting with something that will generate a lot more conversation. I don't know whether that's workable or not, but that seems to me would make it efficient, but also be cognizant of times that we need to be not hemmed in with a schedule that would limit discussion.
Other thoughts? Councillor Moffat?
Yeah, I would agree with that, that there's a difference between just an update that, for example, an RFP's been issued or, investigations have been undertaken in accordance with the direction versus, as Councillor DeVolen has said, something that requires a lot of input and discussion. And I would leave it to, I guess, to you and the CAO to determine whether or not it's a separate meeting or just a quick update contained in an agenda. I'm happy to do it that way.
Okay. Well, we'll see how the working groups meetings go and what information they have to bring back to us, and we'll call meetings as we see they're needed or provide information, in a committee of the whole format. So I think that we have covered everything. Unless anybody's got any final comments to make in a general way about what we've talked about today. Any further thoughts? This is a really quiet group today.
I think Councillor Roberts has
Yeah.
her.
I think I just don't have good lighting today. What can I say? I'll wait for the okay. Just final thoughts is that a few comments have been made about oh, that should be at the county, or that should be at the county, or we should just be one tier. So I think we just have to be cautious. That's not the conversation that we're having today. I'm certainly not having that conversation today. We're sort of dealing with the service delivery review, that other piece. If it's the will of county council to go down that direction, to have that other conversation. And I also just want to be really cautious about how much work we do ask our staff to do when we ask for reports, or I think Warden, you mentioned jokingly, oh, we'll just get Mike to write another report. Well, I just think it is important to sort of set our priorities and which are the top ones and which are the things that we want to get working on first, and what things should wait, because everybody only has so much time, and they also have a whole lot of other things on their desks. So that's just a kind of ending with a bit of a cautionary note, is just watching capacity with our staff. That's all, at both the local levels and at the county.
Thanks. I appreciate those comments. I think we're all fully cognizant of that this is and I definitely was joking, because I know that all of our CAOs are probably overworked at this point in time, or sometimes they are. And that some of this work will take longer than others. Some of it is a little bit more low-hanging fruit, and we'll work away at it as we can. We just want to be making progress, with slow and steady progress, without overburdening or overstressing anybody. Any other comments? Well, I'd like to thank you all. I think that we've sort of set some direction here, and agreed with the recommendations that we've been given. And so I would look to a mover and a seconder to receive the report and the recommendations. Councillor DeVolen and Councillor Moffat.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Service Delivery Review Implementation Steering Committee received the May 26, 2021 update and next steps staff report, and that staff proceed on the next steps as directed.
All in favor? That's carried. And after thanking everybody one more time, I'd look for someone to move for adjournment. Come on, Pat. Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Schell.
Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Schell. Be it resolved that the Service Delivery Review Implementation Steering Committee now adjourn.
All in favor? That's carried.
And Mike March, if that's who, sir, would you give me a call after this, please?
He heard you.
Thanks again, everybody. See you all soon.
Thanks.
Be safe, everyone.